Hey everyone, welcome back. I think we all know the feeling, right? There's so much information out there these days, and it just feels like things are moving so fast.
Absolutely. We're constantly bombarded with new ideas, new
It
trends.
can be overwhelming, for sure. And in a world like that, I think it's more important than ever to really focus on the fundamentals, to get to the core of what truly matters.
I totally agree. Cutting through the noise, finding those timeless principles, that's where the real value lies.
And that's exactly what we're doing today, listeners. We're taking a deep dive into the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, a compilation of wisdom from a true icon in Silicon Valley, someone who's not only achieved incredible success, but has also really thought deeply about how to live a fulfilling life.
That's right, Naval Ravikant. The name might ring a bell, founder of companies like Opinions and AngelList, early investor in some huge names you definitely know, like Uber and Twitter.
But what makes this deep dive so interesting is that we're not just focusing on his business acumen. We're going beyond that. This almanac, which gathers his thoughts and insights from years of sharing his wisdom, it's like a blueprint for building wealth and living a life that truly resonates with you.
It's a unique blend of practical advice and philosophical reflection, something that I think can benefit everyone, no matter what stage of life they're in.
Exactly. So for you listeners, the mission we're on today is to unpack Naval's core philosophies. We're talking about wealth creation, how to make better decisions, how to cultivate genuine happiness, all from the perspective of someone who's actually walked the walk. And we're going through his writings and interviews, pulling out the most actionable insights so you can apply them in your own life right now.
And what's really valuable is that this isn't some guru preaching from a mountaintop. Naval is incredibly grounded. Even Tim Ferriss, in his foreword to the Almanac, emphasizes that you shouldn't just blindly accept Naval's ideas. It's about taking them, examining them critically, and figuring out how they fit into your own unique journey.
So let's jump right in. And the natural starting point is wealth creation. Now, Naval really emphasizes this clear distinction between wealth, money, and status. I think it's something we often confuse.
Definitely. We use the terms interchangeably, but for Naval, they have very different meanings.
And for you listeners, if you're thinking about your own goals, his focus is very much on wealth. Not just having money, but having those assets that are actually working for you, generating more wealth even while you sleep.
Right. Money is just a tool. It's a medium of exchange. And status, as Naval sees it, is just your position in some social hierarchy, often quite arbitrary and fleeting. What he's truly advocating for is building real, lasting wealth.
Which brings up a really interesting point he makes about the ethics of wealth creation. He argues that if you fundamentally believe that creating wealth is somehow wrong or unethical, you're almost guaranteed to subconsciously sabotage your own efforts. It's about aligning your mindset with your goals.
It's about recognizing that creating value for others and generating wealth for yourself don't have to be mutually exclusive. In fact, when done right, they actually reinforce each other.
He also cautions against getting trapped in those status games, where people are constantly trying to one-up each other, often by tearing down those who are actually producing something valuable.
It's a zero-sum game. You're essentially fighting for slices of a pie that isn't growing. True wealth creation, on the other hand, is about expanding the pie for everyone.
Okay, so let's talk about how to actually build that wealth. And Naval is crystal clear on this. You're not going to achieve financial freedom just by trading your time for money.
Right. Working for a fixed salary, no matter how high it is, just keeps you on that treadmill.
It's about ownership, listeners. Owning equity in a business, that's the key.
Because it aligns your interests with the success of the enterprise as a whole. You're not just an employee, you're a partner, a stakeholder.
So how do you create that kind of value that translates into wealth?
Well, Naval suggests it's about giving society what it desires but doesn't yet know how to obtain, and doing it at scale.
And he often uses the example of Steve Jobs, who, before the iPhone even existed, understood our deep desire for powerful mobile computing and then figured out how to make it accessible to everyone.
It's about anticipating needs, solving problems, and creating solutions that benefit a huge number of people.
Now, here's something I find really fascinating, this idea of playing long-term games with long-term people.
Yeah, this is one of Naval's core principles, and it applies to so many areas of life, not just wealth creation.
He believes that the most significant rewards, whether financial, relational, or even intellectual, come from the magic of compound interest.
It's not about quick wins or overnight success. It's about consistent effort over time, about choosing the right industries, the right partners, and then sticking with them through the inevitable ups and downs.
He even mentions Elad Gil, someone he's worked with closely, as an example of a high-integrity partner who embodies that long-term mindset.
And he emphasizes the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are intelligent, driven, and above all, trustworthy. He specifically advises against partnering with those who are cynical or pessimistic.
Because that negativity can be contagious and ultimately sabotage your efforts.
Exactly. And this leads to another crucial concept: specific knowledge.
What is specific knowledge?
Yeah.
And why is it so important for our listeners?
Well, specific knowledge is something you can't just learn from a textbook or a course. It's that unique knowledge you acquire through a combination of your innate talents, your experiences, and your passions.
It's the thing that you were naturally drawn to as a kid, something that felt like play to you but looked like hard work to everyone else.
Right. It could be anything from sales skills to musical ability, from an obsessive fascination with science fiction to a deep understanding of game theory. It's something that's authentically you.
And because it's so uniquely you, it's almost impossible for others to replicate.
And it's incredibly difficult for technology to automate. Which means, in our rapidly changing world, specific knowledge is one of your biggest competitive advantages.
And building on that, Naval talks a lot about accountability. He argues that taking on business risks under your own name, while it might feel scarier, actually leads to greater rewards.
Because it signals to the world that you're serious, that you're willing to put your reputation on the line.
And he makes a really interesting point about the nature of risk in the modern world. He says that the downside risk, while it shouldn't be taken lightly, isn't as catastrophic as we often imagine it to be.
He mentions personal bankruptcy as an example. It's a safety net, a way to get a fresh start if things don't go as planned. So don't let fear paralyze you.
Take calculated risks, embrace accountability, and the potential rewards can be huge.
And to really amplify those rewards, you need leverage. Naval identifies 3 primary forms of leverage: capital, labor, and products with no marginal cost of replication.
That third one, products with no marginal cost of replication, like code and media, that's what he calls permissionless leverage. Anyone can do it.
You don't need anyone's permission to write a book, record a podcast, or build a software program. And those products can work for you 24/7, reaching a potentially massive audience.
So he actively encourages everyone to explore writing, recording, coding. These are the tools of the new economy.
But here's the catch: leverage multiplies judgment.
Meaning if you have bad judgment, leverage will just make things worse, faster.
Exactly. So developing sound judgment becomes absolutely crucial.
And Naval has some really interesting insights into how to actually do that. He says forget about those generic business classes and endlessly reading business magazines.
Instead, focus on acquiring foundational knowledge. Things like microeconomics, game theory, psychology, persuasion, ethics, math, computer science.
These are the underlying principles that allow you to see the world more clearly, to make better decisions.
And he introduces this concept of setting an aspirational hourly rate.
So listeners, think about a rate that seems almost ridiculously high to you right now.
The purpose isn't necessarily to achieve that rate immediately, but to use it as a filter for how you spend your time.
If a task can be done by someone else for less than your aspirational rate, delegate it. If a problem can be solved for less than that rate, solve it quickly or ignore it.
It's about valuing your time and focusing on the activities that have the highest impact.
And ultimately, Naval challenges us all to become the best in the world at what we do. But he adds an important caveat.
Continuously redefine what you do until that statement becomes true. It's about finding that unique intersection of your specific knowledge, your passions, and what the world needs.
Which naturally leads us to authenticity. Naval argues that the best way to escape competition is not to try to beat everyone else at the same game, but to be so authentically yourself that no one can compete with you.
He often uses Joe Rogan and Scott Adams as examples. They've carved out such unique niches for themselves that they're essentially playing in their own leagues.
So that's a pretty comprehensive overview of Naval's principles on wealth creation. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about judgment, which, as we've heard, is absolutely essential, especially when you start wielding leverage.
Because with leverage, even small errors in judgment can get amplified into huge mistakes.
So how does Naval define judgment?
He defines it as wisdom applied to solving external problems. It's about understanding the long-term consequences of your actions, being able to accurately assess situations, and making decisions that lead to favorable outcomes.
And he emphasizes that thinking clearly is the foundation of good judgment.
And being a clear thinker is not the same as just being smart.
True knowledge, he says, is intrinsic. It's built from the ground up, from first principles. He admires people who can explain complex things simply.
Like Richard Feynman, who could break down complicated physics concepts so anyone could understand them. If you can't explain something simply, you probably don't really get it yourself.
He also talks about the importance of seeing reality as it is, without letting your ego or your preconceived notions cloud your judgment. And he defines suffering as that moment when your desired reality clashes with actual reality. So shedding that ego, being able to accept things as they are, that's crucial for making better decisions.
And in a world that's constantly demanding our attention, creating space for thinking is more important than ever. You need those quiet moments, free from distractions, to really process information and arrive at sound judgments.
He also talks about shedding identity, about questioning those habits and beliefs that we've accumulated over time and asking ourselves if they're still serving us.
Our identities are often just bundles of habits. And if we're not careful, we can become so attached to those habits that we lose sight of who we really are and what we truly want.
When it comes to decision-making, he points to the classical virtues as enduring heuristics.
Honesty, for example. He cites Warren Buffett's rule. Praise specifically, criticize generally, and the power of saying no. If you can't decide, he says, the answer is probably no, especially when it comes to big commitments.
He also introduces this interesting heuristic called run uphill. If you're faced with two choices that seem equally good, choose the one that's more painful in the short term.
Because that path often leads to greater long-term rewards. It forces you to grow, to overcome challenges.
To further sharpen your judgment, he recommends collecting mental models.
These are frameworks and principles from various disciplines that help you understand how the world works.
Things like evolutionary biology, game theory, the wisdom of thinkers like Charlie Munger and Nassim Taleb.
He also talks about inversion, thinking about what you want to avoid, not just what you want to achieve, and complexity theory, recognizing that we can't predict everything.
And he repeatedly emphasizes the importance of reading.
Reading, he says, is a superpower. Especially in a world of information overload, having a genuine love for reading, for learning, that sets you apart.
He encourages people to read what they love until they love to read, even if it's what he calls mental junk food.
The point is to build that habit of intellectual curiosity.
He also encourages rereading great books. You'll often discover new layers of meaning as you grow and change.
And teaching what you've learned, explaining it to others, is one of the best ways to solidify your own understanding.
To become a clearer thinker, he recommends immersing yourself in the works of the greats in math, science, and philosophy.
And filtering out the noise, resisting the urge to blindly follow any particular tribe or ideology. Truth over social approval.
Okay, so we've covered wealth creation, we've covered judgment. Now let's talk about happiness, arguably the most important topic of all.
And Naval starts by making it very clear that happiness is not something you find, it's something you learn.
It's a skill you develop, like physical fitness.
The mind is incredibly malleable, he says, and we often spend far too much energy trying to manipulate the external world to make us happy.
While neglecting our internal state.
He emphasizes the importance of presence, of being in the moment, and inner peace, quieting that constant mental chatter, letting go of the anxiety of what's next.
He also makes this really profound statement. Every desire is a chosen unhappiness.
When we chase after things, believing that I'll be happy when I get that, we're setting ourselves up for a never-ending cycle of dissatisfaction.
He cautions against the delusion that success in the external world will automatically lead to happiness. Happiness is an inside job.
And one of the biggest obstacles to happiness, he says, is envy. All those shoulds we internalize, the constant comparisons with others, that's a surefire path to misery.
Life is a single-player game, he reminds us.
Happiness is about playing your own game well.
And he emphasizes that happiness is built through habits, avoiding things like excessive alcohol and sugar, limiting social media use.
Surrounding yourself with people who are generally happy and optimistic.
He talks about the 5 chimps theory, the idea that you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Choose your company wisely.
He also stresses the power of acceptance.
When you can't change a situation, accept it. He even uses the word accept as a kind of internal mantra.
And ultimately, he brings it back to personal responsibility. No one can make you happy but you. You have to save yourself.
So let's dive a little deeper into those principles of saving yourself. The first one is choosing to be yourself. Listening to your own inner voice, not trying to be someone you're not.
embracing your uniqueness.
Then choosing to care for yourself. This includes everything from paying attention to your physical environment to limiting phone use, from making healthier choices to learning to say no. He talks about the principle. Easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life.
He also highlights the importance of meditation and mental strength.
Meditation, he says, is like intermittent fasting for the mind.
It helps you clear out the clutter to become more focused, more present.
And he talks about building yourself through habits. Small, consistent actions over time. Impatience with actions, patience with results.
He also encourages choosing to grow, setting up systems instead of just focusing on goals, becoming the most successful version of yourself with the least amount of struggle.
And reading, of course, is a big part of that.
And finally, choosing to free yourself, figuring out what you truly want, which is often the hardest part.
And then moving from a focus on freedom to freedom from negative emotions, from reactions, from feeling forced into things you don't want to do.
Now, beyond the practical, Naval also delves into some pretty profound philosophical ideas.
He tackles the big question, what is the meaning of life?
And he offers a few different perspectives.
First, the meaning of life is personal. You have to create it yourself.
Second, there might not be any inherent meaning at all. It's all just a cosmic accident. He uses this analogy of riding on water.
And third, from a scientific perspective, life might actually be contributing to the eventual heat death of the universe.
He also stresses the importance of living by your values. He shares some of his own values, like prioritizing peer relationships and rejecting anger.
And he emphasizes that alignment of values is crucial for good relationships.
He also talks about what he calls rational Buddhism, a philosophy based on skepticism, testing things out yourself, and focusing on what actually works.
It's about questioning everything and finding your own path.
So, wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, listeners. From building wealth to making better decisions to finding happiness, Naval Ravikant's Almanack is a treasure trove of wisdom.
It's a roadmap for living a more intentional, fulfilling life.
And remember, it's not about blindly accepting every idea. It's about taking these principles, examining them critically, and seeing how they resonate with you.
So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you. What's one key insight from today's deep dive that really stood out to you?
What's something you can start applying in your life right now?
If you're eager to learn more, we highly recommend checking out the Almanack of Naval Ravikant yourself. It's an incredible resource.
And as always, thanks for joining us on this journey of exploration. Until next time.